Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today as I talk you through flipping the script, just rethinking about how we're teaching Bridge to our youth players and our prospective youth players. I'm Michael Rushworth, I'm a BAMSA community researcher, and it's my pleasure today to talk you through how we could re-implement our Bridge teaching programs to cater more towards our youth audiences. So who am I to talk about Youth Bridge then? Well, I started playing Bridge when I was 18 and I played at university as well. After that, I then trained to be a maths, business and economics teacher, and I mainly taught Bridge online during COVID. As part of that then, I'm now teaching in schools and I'm teaching to youth online, and my Bridge journey started when I was 18. It was a cold December and I noticed an advert on Facebook for learning Bridge, and my family friends played, but I didn't have the time, they were usually busy. So as a first year university student, I went along, small lit room, me and 4 other people of varying ages, and we learnt some bidding, we learnt some card play, we learnt some Stamen, and that was it. After that, we hit the supervised play sessions and we just improved via osmosis. As part of what I do as well, I also conduct the case studies for BAMSA on schools and youth education. So I've been looking at different countries and how they teach their youth players and the good bits and the better bits that we can use to enhance all youth teaching programs. So whilst today these are my views, I'm also going to introduce the views of our experienced colleagues, and my aim today is to get you to think about how we're teaching youth before my views on what we do and what we go next. So I'd like to start off then with cognitive science, which is the art of teaching and learning. It's the bread and butter of what we do in the education profession when it comes to teaching youth. Okay, so I want to start off with a bit of cognitive science, and I want to look at what makes a good lesson, how do we know what they know, and why is it that some children don't enjoy Bridge lessons? What can we do to make our Bridge lessons better? And I want to start with Willingham's Why Don't Students Like School? And this is the puzzle that he introduces in his book. So in an empty room, there's a candle, some matches, and a box of tacks. And the goal is to have the lit candle about 5 feet off the ground. So you've tried melting some of the wax on the bottom of the candle and sticking it to the wall, but that wasn't effective. So how can you get the lit candle 5 feet off the ground without having to hold it there? So tacks, nails, they're the same thing. I want you to pause the video, have a think, and then feel free to play the video and I'll give you the answer. Okay, so the solution to the puzzle is you nail the box to the wall and then you stick the candle on top of the box. Sorted. And I suppose what I want to explain with this puzzle is that we're teaching them a card game, but for some children it is confusing as this puzzle. And once you know the answer, it's easy. If you then watch this video again, you don't need to pause it. You already know the answer. But our brain works through a slow, effortful, and uncertain process. So when you're teaching your youth players, it might seem that they don't understand what's going on. In reality, they do. They're just trying to think through their experiences and what they know already, and sometimes they just don't know the answer. So when we're teaching, we not only need to rely on the environment that they're in as well, but how we're posing the problem to our youth players as well as memory. Youth players have got other things going on in their life, and we also need to assume, despite our best intentions, that they haven't practiced during the week. So when it comes to learning, I'm going to show you a model that's as simple as it gets. Okay, and here's our model. So when teaching Bridge, we need to attract their attention. Okay, so we need to attract their attention from the environment, which is this bit here. And a number of Bridge groups and MBOs wish to teach Bridge for free, which I think is great. So with lots of activities available, it's then about attracting those Bridge students to our table. And that includes things like setting up a good learning environment, helping them to concentrate, chunking up knowledge for children into small parts, and putting phones away is a must for everyone. And this also works when we're moving between Bridge lessons as well. So Nuttall, which is another Bridge researcher, says that a student understands and learns and remembers a concept if they've encountered all the underlying information 3 times. So we need to make sure we're retrieving that knowledge from past lessons, our retrieval and our memory remembering, okay, as well as exposing those youth players to the same piece of knowledge to keep helping them remember it. So in each session, you'll usually teach a concept, let's say statement, or responding to majors. And in some sessions, that could last from maybe 30 minutes to 2 hours. And whilst adults may struggle to concentrate for 2 hours, children have an attention span of about 25 minutes. And it's why it's important to get them playing straight away, but also understand that sooner or later, children are going to tire. And that's why I suggest that Bridge lessons should be between 30 minutes to an hour long. And some MBOs, such as France and Norway, are keeping those sessions short to keep the attention of the youth players and to prevent that fatigue. And the fatigue has a name. It's called cognitive load. And this is how much a child's brain or an adult's brain, or anybody's brain, can retain in one session and the information in that session and is linked to working memory. So that's why it's important to build things up in small steps rather than teaching large chunks of a course in one go. And further, we're building knowledge on top of knowledge. And that knowledge allows our youth players to make smaller learning steps than larger jumps that we might do in between lessons. And I like the phrase that Willingham uses in his new book. He uses this phrase that memory is the residual of thought. And it's no different when you're teaching bridge. You know what high card points are, and you know the responses to one no trump because you've learnt it by getting the knowledge, by making the mistakes, and by committing it to memory. And that's learning. That's learning on this diagram. You gave it the attention, you learnt it and stored it in your long-term memory, and then if somebody bids one no trump, you recall it back to your working memory so you can then use it. And I suppose with that, it's the act of learning is putting that knowledge then into that long-term memory. And this is where bridge teaching shines, because every piece of knowledge is going to be used at the bridge table. Well, opening bids could be anything. So you need to retain that information and know those opening bids and at least the first round responses. And that's going to help us to retain that information by needing to be alert, by needing to use it all the time. And when children are trying to put that information into their long-term memory, they're going to do that retrieval. They're going to do that retrieval and try and remember it to put it into their working memory again. And so understanding is just remembering in disguise. So we need to find ways to help children remember those past lessons. So for example, using boards that build upon past knowledge or setting them some quizzes on your favorite quiz app. We'll look at some different ways in which we can do this with technology to try and cut down on your workload, but we can also do things like run tournaments, as that's going to allow children to test their knowledge and skills through pure retrieval. Okay, we don't want to stand over them all day. We don't want to give them a crib sheet or a flipper book or whatever. We want to make sure that we are using pure retrieval to know what they know and what they don't know. And finally, this bit on the bottom right hand corner here, children are going to forget. And we usually forget about 50% of whatever we did in the session. So that's because you talked, they played, and then they went home and did other things. They slept and a week passed and they're back at the bridge table again. So the only way to protect this is to then keep recapping that knowledge, keep recapping those concepts, so they're going back then into the long-term memory and then back to being used in working memory again when they're at the bridge table needing to retrieve it. So I think this model is excellent. It's a simplified model of how it is that we're learning in bridge and how is it that our youth players are going to learn at the bridge table. And here's some good examples from MBOs about the use of cognitive science. So Dance School of Bridge, they've got 12 lessons there, nicely chunked up to make sure that we're not overloading cognitive memory. We've got the Project Venus in Israel, and that's keeping them engaged with retrieval practice and sessions to help with memory. And then the Fédération Française de Bridge, and they're making sure that we're chunking those lessons into half-hour segments so that we're being conscious of the cognitive overload and that we're giving them enough knowledge there they can take it away and improve and do well as part of those sessions. Some bridge teachers have also asked me, Michael, we're going into schools, what do we do for behaviour management? I've never taught before as part of the profession, or I've never taught children before, what should I do? So here's my crib sheet for behaviour management. So first, make sure everyone's listening. If they're not listening, the first question you're going to be asked is, what are we doing? I wasn't listening. We also want to be positive. They want to be here. They didn't turn up to do bridge because you forced them. They turned up because they want to learn. So be positive about that. Use that unconditional emotional positivity to say, I'm happy you're here. Let's do this. Let's work on this together and be great. If there's silly behavior, we do need to correct the behavior. But when they're playing boards, we need to give them leeway. We shouldn't be hanging over their shoulder, constantly telling them what they've done wrong, or constantly telling them this crocodile goose concept that you read about last night that's really interesting. Stick to the information, stick to the lesson plan, and stick to keeping it simple. And we want to be nice to these players as well. So some kids might be too cool for bridge, and that, I'm here because I'm showing off that I'm here in this uncool game that we're playing. But actually, just be nice to them. Okay, be nice, unconditional emotional positivity. They might stick around and play. They might think, actually, this is really good. And I had 3 players yesterday who came in, thought, what's bridge? And they were left going, yeah, we enjoyed this. And they thought they were too cool for bridge. But also we need to think about poor behavior. And with poor behavior, we need to direct what they want them to do. So we need to tell them what you want them to do and then ask them to correct it with the correct behavior. Don't tell them what they shouldn't be doing, tell them what they should be doing, and that will give a more positive relationship for that. So that's everything I want to talk about when it comes to cognitive science. Let's move on now. And a concept that I think is really useful for Youth Bridge is to gamify their learning. I'm going to talk for a bit about Marvel Snap. Whether or not you've played it, I think in my mind it is one of the best onboarding games that I've seen in years. The tutorial is simple, it is straightforward, and guides players for a lot of new themes and a lot of moving parts. I'd even suggest if you have time, pause this video, go and download Marvel Snap on your phone or on your PC, go and play the tutorial for 15-20 minutes, and then come back. I think that this will then nicely lead on to what I'm going to say then when we talk about the designer and his thoughts on Marvel Snap. Okay, so whether or not you've downloaded it is up to you, but I want to talk about how the designer wanted to add this depth versus complexity. And I think we can all agree that Bridge is quite a deep game and also quite a complex game as well. I think we've made bidding systems more complicated. And I think because of that, that has alienated some of our youth players, trying to remember everything from how to open one of a suit, Roman keycard Blackwood, transfers, Drury, okay? And we've made the game more complicated. But in terms of card play, it's very deep. It is luck-based, it is skill-based because you've got good Bridge players that are doing very well. And that links on to the fact that we need to balance this depth versus complexity when it comes to this game. And I suppose with Bridge, more is more. People are still playing it, people are still coming up with new systems and new concepts and new ways of thinking about things and new rules, but more. Or is it the fact that we're overloading our youth players thinking, well, they need to know everything there is to know about an opening Bridge system, otherwise they won't do this at the Bridge table. Or they need to know everything about finesses, otherwise they won't do as well at the Bridge table. And I think here we need to understand here that there is a depth limit, that people have a depth limit when it comes to a game. You've only one lifetime. Granted, if we had infinite lifetimes, I'm sure we'd all be Bridge Grandmasters before long, but we only have one life. So we need to understand that there is a depth limit that our youth players will have. And we need to get to that depth limit and try and keep them there as long as we can. Yes, we can grow them beyond that depth limit, and that's why we have Grandmasters and such expert Bridge players. But we need to understand that for youth, there is a limit of depth and a limit of complexity that they are willing to understand. And if we go beyond that, we're going to start losing our players. And we also have to understand the reality as well, that in Bridge, we have to compete with games like Marvel Snap. They're flashier, they're better looking, they're more impulsive and free forms of entertainment. And passive entertainment as well that youth players are going towards, things like social media, things like streaming, and then active entertainment like Marvel Snap is putting more control of progress into the hands of players. And there's plenty of videos about Marvel Snap and about Bridge on how to improve the game. And also, when it comes to games like Marvel Snap or a collectible card game, you can pay to get better cards and do better. So the only thing that youth players are really missing is skill. That they think, as a youth player, if I pay enough money into this game, I'll get great and the game will play itself. But that doesn't work like that in Bridge. In Bridge, you've got to work hard to get good. So we need to think of how we can make our game more gamified, keep them at that depth limit, and understand that there is a limit of their understanding, but also balance out that depth of the game with the complexity that we give when it comes to teaching bidding systems or teaching inference in Bridge. And another point about Bridge as well I want to bring up is that when in some NBOs you want to be a Grandmaster, well, that's either a full-time occupation or you've got to start at the age of 16. We need to accept as a Bridge community that competition and success are going hand in hand for youth. That according to Peps McCree, success is one of the things that's going to drive motivation for our youth players. So in the Duke of Edinburgh Gold Award, that takes about 1 to 2 years to accomplish, and not a lifetime. So we need to understand that when it comes to tournament play and rankings for youth, we want to monitor their progress and we want to aim towards higher goals and greater challenges. So we need to balance a love of competition and improvement with being an accepting and welcoming community. It's going to undermine the success of Youth Bridge if we developed a few very good self-centered players rather than having an open community that respects each other and that is interdependent on other youth players. We also need to accept, as with the first point, that Bridge is a layered game. And as teachers, we need to add those layers slowly and in sequence. Just like in Marvel Snap, layers are added slowly, but also within a sequence. This allows us to get them to play at the bridge table as soon as possible and master the concepts that they're doing as they go. So gamifying bridge and gamifying the learning of bridge is essential then to get youth players on board, to get them to feel that success, to feel motivated and want to continue with this great game. So there's a couple of solutions that I think would be a great way to gamify bridge. And I think the first one is to host regular tournaments as part of your bridge sessions. So we need to be testing their knowledge, which is great for cognitive science, but also giving them that motivation that they've done well, they've achieved something, they've earned something, and we need to make sure that those prizes and awards, and that we're congratulating everybody in that tournament with those prizes and awards. So those that may not win one day might grow up to represent their local clubs or nations. We can't just cream off the top and hope that we're going to get a great youth team for our nation, when in reality we might have great youth players here already that just need a bit more time and development. We also need to be awarding those points and grades earlier. So whatever your National Bridge Organisation or your MBO uses, we need to make sure that youth players are earning those awards earlier. And in a lot of online games that youth are playing at the moment, they have ranking systems. So it might be bronze, silver, gold, platinum, plutonium, okay? And when they finish a season or a month, it's not a complete reset. They don't go back to the start. It might be you've achieved gold ranking and therefore you're going to be reset to the top of silver. So it allows you to keep playing and keep getting better through the season. So they're going to start wanting to earn and compete back to that gold ranking again. So players will have a chance to compete and succeed, even if life and exams might divert their attention for a while. And I think it comes back to what is a Grandmaster of Bridge. If you ask what a Grandmaster of Chess is, well, that's based on an ELO score. But if you ask what a Grandmaster of Bridge is, they have to collect different coloured points, they've got to do different tournaments, and that might be very difficult for them to achieve, even for the most motivated of youth players. So it might be that we need to compete and maybe change our system for bridge, whether it is that we compete in seasons and still have those bronze, silver, gold rankings, maybe a Hall of Fame style system for choosing really good bridge players. And on the EBU website, you've got a Hall of Fame of bridge players. Okay, but they're there because of a repeated attendance and hard work. They didn't just look at the master points and thought, oh, well, they deserve to be here because they've got so many gold points. They did this because they thought that they are hardworking and they've represented bridge very well. So we need to understand that and change how we're ranking our players to give our youth players more opportunities to succeed. And then finally, we want to reward success. As I said earlier, there is no point in trying to get a lot of youth bridge players and creaming off the top. All players have learnt something, all players have that desire to be part of a community. So it's up to you then to celebrate that and give certificates, celebration days, and opportunities for all youth players, not just the ones that float to the top at a particular point in time. So aligning bridge learning with national qualifications, the UK has the NCFE, and that would allow youth players to have a qualification in bridge that could be used in job interviews, university applications, and hopefully would be worth points towards a university application as well. So those are the three ways in which I think gamifying learning is going to help us. We need to be hosting regular tournaments in our lessons. We need to reevaluate our grading system and see how we can give youth players more challenge and more success earlier on. And then to reward all the success of our youth players because they all achieved a great success by being part of the bridge community. I want to move on and have a look at technology and how we are using that in our bridge teaching. So the surge in online bridge isn't going away. And we've now gone away from the places where, say, Bridge Base Online was a one-stop shop for bridge. We've now got more ways to play bridge than ever before, online as well as face-to-face. And as teachers, the allure of technology is very strong. Even though it is distracting for youth players, it will also help with our bridge teaching efforts. And we kind of have these two paradigms here. On the one hand, places like Dansk Scholar Bridge thinking that yes, this needs to be exclusively in person. We need to make sure we're teaching students face to face. On the other hand, other national bridge organisations saying to themselves, well, actually, we want to teach online. We want to be exclusively online because that is a great way of getting that critical mass of players to our bridge table. And so in short then, what is the best way? Is the best way to teach in person? Is the best way to teach online? I think very simply it is how many bridge players do you have? If you've got 1, 2 youth players, maybe being online is a good thing to get that critical mass. But if there's 3 youth players and you at the table, that's 4 people. That's a great number to start playing bridge face to face. So I want to look and think, well, how is it that we can make online bridge work for us rather than being a rival effort and it's being one or the other, face-to-face or exclusively online. So I propose that technology should be used firstly as an onboarding tool. And if you haven't downloaded Tricky Bridge, I think this is a great example of that Marvel Snap paradigm, making sure that we're hooking the players in early, getting them engaged, ready to play that. And I think Tricky Bridge is a great example of that. If you haven't downloaded it, download a copy of Tricky Bridge and play through the tutorial. You'll be very impressed. I also think then that there are some good revision tools as well that we can use. So QBids, Bid72 and FunBridge are excellent ways of getting our players to revise. QBids and Bid72 are based on bidding and improving card play, but FunBridge as well has that dynamic that you can play the hand as well. And I think if you ask players to play 2 to 3 boards a day, that might seem difficult. That might seem difficult to get them to deal out a hand themselves. But if you have an app that gives you feedback and tells you how to improve, well, it's going to be very easy to do. It's that Duolingo concept of having something to do every day. And it's a winner in my book that if you can get one of those apps as part of your youth community, especially FunBridge, if you can get them playing on a FunBridge team, that would be wonderful. And then there's ways to teach online as well. We've got SharpBridge and RealBridge here as well. So if you were teaching online, or it might be you want to gather up your national youth players for a fun tournament, then these two pieces of software are excellent to run that tournament and to get them to play as part of that. So whilst we split in days of teaching from face-to-face to online, competitive play is fairly online dominated. So gone are the days now in terms of youth of long car journeys, expensive trips and filling in forms. We can log into RealBridge and you're now playing in a teams, a pairs match or even a friendly play session. So maybe having a regular weekly event for drop-in, drop-out play, not a tournament where they have to sit there for 2 to 3 hours, but have an hour where they can turn up, play a few boards and then go. And a semi-regular tournament, possibly every 3 months, will keep those players engaged. Combine this with what I recommended before of a session type style of player ranking to allow them to gain points during a season or a month, and that's going to have online youth ready to go, and then you're going to have an online youth bridge club ready set up, ready to go. So there's some good examples of how we can get technology to work for us rather than to rival our efforts that we're doing at the bridge table. So finally, what I'd like to cover is then what's going to make the ideal bridge lesson. Before I answer that question though, I think there's another question we need to ask before we can answer this one. So then we need to ask the question, instead of what an ideal bridge lesson looks like, is what does a bridge youth player look like? So what does the ideal bridge youth player look like? Well, they're regularly attending lessons, they're playing with friends, they're learning as they go, they're enjoying the game, and nothing to them is quite like a bridge session. They're also making and keeping bridge friends, whether that's in their classes or other national youth players that they've played against or played with and they're keeping in touch with. They'll occasionally play in tournaments, so either in their lessons or in the regional events. And players of all ages are welcoming and encouraging them to attend. These youth players are attending these events either at free or at a subsidised cost. They're regularly playing kitchen table bridge with family. It's an enjoyable pastime and they're encouraged and motivated to do well by all around them. The students see bridge as a way forward and as an essential social skill. They're also actively seeking the bridge community wherever possible. They're going to choose universities based on it, they're going to keep friendships with bridge based on it, and they're going to feel part of something bigger, part of a bigger global community. And finally, they're their own principled people. Not everything is about bridge to them. They've got friends, they enjoy their activities, and they excel in whatever they do. And their etiquette at the table and their etiquette as a bridge player is exemplary and is a perfect example of what we look for from youth. Notice I haven't mentioned anything here about international tournament play, recruitment, master points. They're playing the game because the community's there and they love being a part of it, and it likes being a part of them. It's the intrinsic motivation they need, and they may need to be encouraged with prizes, praise and recognition, but ultimately it's the love of the game and the love of the community that keeps them here. So now we've answered what a bridge youth player looks like, let's move on and see what would make an ideal bridge lesson. So let's have a look then at what the ideal lesson looks like. So the ideal bridge lesson is a regular lesson that builds up the depth slowly towards the depth limit and adds complexity when they are ready. So there's no point in us teaching complicated additional pieces of system that they might use maybe once in every 30 boards when instead we should be dealing with them enjoying the game and getting that enjoyment out of the depth and the complexity that they've gained so far. Students also need to be making connections and partnerships. So if they turn up with their friends, that's a natural partnership, which is great. But some students might turn up by themselves or might be looking for that social connection. So connecting those students together, getting them to play with each other regularly, means that they'll keep attending together so they get to play bridge together as well. We need to be showing the competitive side of bridge through things like tournaments, but also the competitive side through working together with the partnership, with your team, and then with your class as well, and that we're all part of this community and we're all working together to help everybody out and improve. Bridge is also a social skill. Firms value it, universities value it, governments are valuing it, and we need to show students that bridge as a social skill is just the same as debate, is the same as conversation, is the same as mathematical ability, that it is a social skill that is valued in the world. We also want to show our youth bridge players that we're part of a live and growing community. Opportunities at local bridge club, opportunities to play with other youth pairs in your country or around the world, and show that they're part of a growing community, that it's not just your class, that there's other people involved that are playing bridge, and we're all part of this big community working together. Finally, we need to be teaching these principles and etiquette as part of the bridge experience. There's no point in us raising bridge players to be very good at bridge but very poor bridge players. Instead, we need to be teaching those etiquette skills, teaching those good manners as we are going through their bridge experience. So we need to make sure that we're teaching the principles and etiquette, so at the bridge table then they're exemplary bridge players and great role models for future prospective youth bridge players. So how do I rank these? It's completely up to you. You might have a different view on how I've ranked them in this list. You might decide that etiquette is more important. The issue isn't the list. The issue isn't the order of the list. The issue is making sure that all of these are included somewhere in your lesson to create a rich lesson experience for your students. So where do we go from here? Well, one article that I've seen online recently is chess as a test case for teenagers. Teenagers love playing chess, even though they're bad at it, even though they're not looking to play more international events. Chess has overtaken in some schools as a dominant mind sport. And I think bridge could really learn some lessons here for perpetuating and proliferating bridge within schools. I'm also going to attach as part of this some recommendations. There's a small list of them that you might want to consider as a teacher, as a national bridge organisation, and even as a bridge player. Feel free to use them. Feel free to email me them, whether or not you agree or disagree, or you've got some other things to think about. I'd love to hear from you. And then finally, I want to thank you. I want to thank you as a teacher of youth, because that is the lifeblood of the game and that is how this is going to proliferate forwards. So you're doing a great job. Keep going. They really do value your contribution. Also, I want to thank the people who aren't youth bridge players but have watched this video. I really hope that you take up the mantle to start teaching some youth players. They are an excellent source of aspiration in our community for what we want to see in a good bridge community and a good bridge player. And that's everything I wanted to discuss for today. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that I've given you some ideas about how you could be teaching bridge to youth and some things to think about there as well. If you want to contact me, my email's at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to email me. More than happy to strike up a conversation and help in any way I can. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.